The door squeaked open and a sleek, sure-of-itself cat with molten gold eyes walked in. Her movements were graceful and almost deliberate, like she'd been there before. Stuck for a moment, I knew nothing what to do. She seemed unconcerned about anything around her, but I had no notion from where this cat had come from. Without thinking, she walked across the hall like she owned it. As my heart beat fast, I said, oh my God, it wasn't just any cat. There was one thing about the cat. She had something that I couldn't quite describe. I quickly grabbed my phone and FaceTimed my boyfriend Sergio, who was not in the same city as me. The look on his face on the screen showed confusion. What's going on? He asked. I turned the camera on our surprise visitor. I tried to keep my voice steady as I said, look at this. This cat came into your house like she owned it. Sergio laughed, just as surprised as I was. He asked me again, are you sure? Where did she come from? I don't know, I said as I followed the cat who was strolling through the living room with confidence. The cat was just taking a look at everything. I was shocked when the cat swung her tail like a rhythm on her way upstairs. I was following her, not sure what she would do next. I was interested in what she was doing up there. She entered Sergio's room straight forward, sprang on his bed, and curled up like she had done so 100 times before. I couldn't deny her fascinating nature, even though I wasn't sure what to think. Her sharp eye made her look almost human, and her smooth hair sparkled in the sun in the afternoon. It was easy for me to pick her up and bring her back downstairs. Instead of saying anything, she gave me a sweet kiss. Who are you? I asked in a half-joking way. Of course she didn't answer, but it looked like she was saying, you already know. For a while, she rubbed her purring fur across my legs. I started to smile, even though the situation was strange. That evening, I had to make a choice. I just couldn't leave her alone in Sergio's house. What if she broke something or got scared? I didn't want to let her go into the yard, but I did, because I thought she would find her way back to where she belonged. But when I went to Sergio's house the next morning, she was sitting quietly at the front door. Her golden eyes looked at me as if it was telling me that I was late, and her tail was curled up over her paws. With a strong desire to find her owner, I sent letter asking if anyone else had lost a cat to Sergio's friends. Then I carefully folded the piece of paper and read it again to make sure it sounded polite and worried. I took a deep breath and sent the note to them. I was happy with what I had written and felt some relief. Surely, soon someone would take her and the mystery would be over. Over the next few hours, I looked at my phone more often than normal, hoping to hear back. Finally, in the late afternoon, a text message came through, thanking me for checking and also mentioning they don't have a cat. As I read the message again, I felt a mix of sadness and confusion. Who was she if she wasn't one of them? Where did she come from? I wanted to find out more, so I called Sergio's dad, who lived nearby. He listened carefully as I talked about how the cat had behaved and how she had walked into the house with such confidence. He seemed more amused than shocked when he said, "Oh, that cat. She's been hanging out at the warehouse in the backyard for months." It took me by surprise when I learned this. Months? We had no idea. He laughed softly. She didn't really bother us. She would stay close to the building and be alone. We really thought she was wild. We never saw her or heard her meow. I frowned as I tried to make sense of this statement in light of the friendly, sure-of-herself animal that had walked into the house like it was her own. But why now? I asked out loud. Why would she come inside now, after all this time? Sergio's dad didn't know the answer, and the question kept going through my mind, getting harder as time went on. What had changed? What made this strange cat decide to leave her life of being alone outside and look for friends inside our walls? Things or people seemed to have been on her mind. I didn't consider her arriving in as a coincidence that night as I curled the cat on the couch next to me. She has a unique characteristic about her which I struggled to articulate. Her sharp golden eyes were looking up at me. For a moment, I thought she was trying to say something. What though? When Sergio got back from his trip, I couldn't wait to introduce him to our unexpected guest. He made fun of me for opening the door for her. He was afraid she would love someone else more than she loved me. But as soon as she saw him, she changed her mind even more. She walked up to him slowly and petted his legs. Her purr was louder than I had ever heard it. He laughed and said, "Well, I guess she likes me too. It looks like she's going to stay." We decided to take her to the vet and check her for a microchip. She was like an angel in the car. She sat quietly in the back seat as if she knew exactly where we were going. Things went in a different direction at the vet's office. When we got there, the cat was sitting calmly on the exam table. Her golden eyes were softly interested as she looked around the room. She looked cool and unfazed, and I felt proud for a split second. I tried to make things better by saying, "She's so well behaved." The friendly but strict vet smiled a little before bending down to start his examination. He gently pressed on some parts of her body, checked her joints, and carefully looked at her ears, teeth, and claws as he moved his hands over her smooth body. At first, everything looked fine. Then he wrinkled his brow a little as he ran his fingers along her back and ribs. He took a break, and when he went back to studying, he moved more slowly and carefully. When he told us the cat wasn't like other cats, his voice was tense. It made my stomach hurt. I was interested, so I asked him, barely above a whisper, what he meant by what he said. The vet stood up straight, and his face looked serious but hard to read. He began by carefully choosing his words. He told us that there are some physical traits in the cat that are not normal. Her bones and claws don't look like those of a domestic dog. She's different in some way. Sergio and I looked at each other with worry. As a knot of dread formed in my chest, I felt my heart beat faster. With worry in his voice, Sergio asked her if she was sick. The vet turned his head away. "No, she seems very healthy," the doctor said. "But there's something else. To find out more, I'd like to do some tests. Can you leave her here for a while?" I paused and looked down at her. She looked calm and trusting as she raised her bright golden eyes to mine. In a reluctant voice, "I guess that's fine." "Is she going to be all right?" The vet told us she would be taken care of well. When we left the office, I thought something wasn't right. The trip home was unusually quiet. Instead of the usual banter between Sergio and me, there was a heavy, silent pressure. I wasn't sure what the vet meant when he said different. Finally, breaking the silence, I asked Sergio what he thought. Behind the wheel, Sergio shook his hands very hard. "I'm not sure. Could she be a unique breed?" His words didn't make me less stressed. I thought of a lot of possible outcomes, each one less likely than the last. When the doctor called us later that day, his voice was calm, but heavy enough to make my heart drop. He said we should come in. He told us to come see what was going on. The words were like a cloud of thunder over there. Sergio and I looked at each other with faces that showed the same mix of fear and excitement. "What do you think it'd be?" As we got into the car, my voice was shaking as I asked. Even though his speech showed he was nervous, Sergio said, "We'll find out soon enough." My thoughts spun around in my head for every mile of the very long trip back to the clinic. What do you think the doctor would have found? Was it something bad? Something uncommon? On the other hand, something we would not have even thought of. When we got here, my hands were shaking. We were met at the door by the doctor, who looked calm but serious. He answered, "Thank you for coming back to the clinic so quickly," and led us to a private room. There was a stack of papers and a set of pictures on his desk. They were X-rays, test results, and notes written in perfect handwriting. My heart sank as he waved for us to sit down. "Your cat is not a cat," he said in a calm voice. As soon as he spoke, the room seemed to move toward Sergio and me. Looking at him blankly, we both tried to make sense of it all. When he claimed the cat wasn't a cat, I eventually asked him what he meant, even though it was difficult to hear. With a startled and concerned expression on his face, the doctor gestured toward the X-rays. Her bones form, their density, and the length of her claws all suggest something wild and alien. "I think she's a hybrid, a cross between a house cat and a margay," The vet said that margays are small wildcats that live in South and Central America. Even though they look a lot like house cats, their behaviors and habits are completely wild. Though this was a very rare hybrid, he said, it's very uncommon for a margay to mate with a house cat. The news was both interesting and scary. The animal we took in wasn't just a stray. She was a natural wonder that was alive and well. Now what? My voice was shaking as I asked. The vet's answer made me think. He let out a deep sigh and said, "It's hard to own a hybrid like this," he said in a steady but firm voice. "An awful lot of things have legal effects, including moral concerns. You have to let the local wildlife agents know about this." The words hit me like a gut punch. My neck started to swell as my stomach rolled around. When I looked at Sergio, I tried to feel better, but his face showed that he understood how confused I was. "Are you saying we can't keep her?" With a little shaking in my voice, I asked. The vet leaned forward and folded his hands over the table. He said, "It's not that simple. Hybrids like her are pretty rare, and there are rules in place to protect them and you. Even though she seems tamed, her wild traits could come out at any time. Not just whether you want to keep her, but also whether it's the right thing to do." His words seemed like a cold piece of truth. I didn't know how important the conversation was, so I just looked down at the cat sitting calmly at my feet. We were told to give her up after she had chosen us and trusted us. How could we possibly abandon her now? "But she's become close to us," I said, my voice tinged with despair. "She's glad to be here. Is that not enough?" The vet's face got softer, but he didn't change his mind. He said in a soft voice, "I know how you feel. But this isn't just about making her happy. Most of the time, hybrids have wants that are bigger than what a normal home can meet. They need special care, and having them in your home can cause problems you didn't expect." I looked at Sergio and hoped that he would step in and defend us. He instead sighed deeply and ran his hand through his hair. He said, "This is a lot to process. May I have some time to think about it?" The vet said yes. "Of course. But I think you should get in touch with wildlife officials as soon as possible. They will be able to look at her situation and figure out what to do next." It was very quiet on the way home. The cat was sitting still in her cage. Her golden eyes looked out at us with a sweetness that made things even worse. How are we going to let her go? The quiet was finally broken when I asked. My voice was shaking and tears were coming out of my eyes. She found us. She believed in us. That must mean something, right? Sergio's jaw was tight as he kept his eyes on the road. He said in a low voice, "It does. But this might be bigger than us. It might not have much to do with what we want." As I looked out the window, the trees moved quickly past me. I knew she should be with us, that we were her family now, with every fiber of my being. But deep down, I couldn't ignore what the vet said. The remainder of the evening passed in a haze. Reaching out to smooth her fur, the cat snuggled up on the couch and nuzzled my fingers. She seemed to sense that I was upset. How can anything so wild feel so much like home? I said it to myself more than anyone else. Sergio sat down next to me and put his arm around my shoulders. He said in a whisper, "We'll figure it out." His voice was firm, but there was doubt in his eyes. "We will make sure she is safe no matter what. That's the most important thing. It hurt to give her up. The pain was deep in my chest. We didn't even know we were missing a certain kind of love until she chose us and put her trust in us. How on earth could we let her go?" That night, I stayed up and kept thinking about what the vet had said. It's about whether you want to keep her as well as about if it's the appropriate thing to do. Turning around, I found the cat snuggled up at the foot of the bed. With each quiet breath, her belly moved up and down. I wanted to know if she knew how much trouble she had caused us all. Someone who knows a lot about wildlife confirmed the vet's results. As the doctor put it, she's a remarkable specimen. In any case, she is stuck between two worlds. Hybrids often have trouble adjusting, whether they are in the wild or in a zoo. The doctor told her to be watched at an animal shelter so that professionals could figure out what to do. The day we turned her over, was one of the worst of our lives. As the people working at the shelter took her away, her big, curious eyes were full of doubt. They said she was safe. She will get the best care possible from us, they promised. After a few months, the shelter called. She was too controlled, and after a lot of research, they learned she couldn't live in the wild. Would you want to adopt her permanently? They asked. Yes, I said with tears running down my face. She looked like she had never left when she returned home. She jumped onto the couch and purred happily as we gathered around her. Even though it was all worth it, our relationship with her had been full of surprises, problems, and sadness.